What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we're taking a deep dive into all of the melee classes and their skill trees in Wonderlands. So we're going to be talking about things like class strengths, what makes each class unique, and who that class might be best for. Now in my next video, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about all of the ranged classes. So let's go ahead and get this video kicked off with our Frosty Barbarian class, the Brrzerker. So this class thrives on close combat and staying within striking distance of enemies. Now the only goal that this class has is to inflict as much melee pain as possible, but they're also able to take just as much punishment. Their class feat is called Rage of the Ancients, and it causes the Brrzerker to become enraged when you use an action skill, which are your two class skills. Now, when you become enraged, you add bonus frost damage to your attacks, but there are also some other bonuses that come with being enraged. So one, you will not lose enrage when you use skills. Instead, it'll only add to your enrage meter, basically prolonging the effect. So you want to use those skills as much as possible. So this already sounds like music to some folks' ears, right? A barbarian class that lets you enrage to add extra damage, and then when you use your skills, you just extend your enrage buff. So it sounds just like if you love primal carnage, then this class would be a great fit. But we're going to go ahead and keep exploring all of the Brrzerker's action skills. So the two skills that this class has are Dreadwind and Feral Surge. Now, Dreadwind is an absolute classic. It is a whirlwind that damages enemies over time and then grants increased movement speed and slow immunity. For Feral Surge, you're going to leap towards a target. You're going to deal frost damage in an area, and if you happen to kill an enemy when you leap forward, its cooldown is reset. And any non-boss enemies that are damaged by this skill will be instantly killed if their health is below a certain percentage. And this whole thing is just unreal because you can leap, instantly kill enemies, which will then reset its cooldown, allowing you to leap again and basically rinse repeat, just playing leapfrog through groups of enemies. And as long as you're killing stuff, you can continue jumping. So next, I want to work through the skill tree that comes with this class because there are some really great opportunities for synergy here. So tier 1 starts with some kind of small buffs that add to your kind of key damage elements. So you have Ancestral Frost, which boosts your frost damage. You have Savagery, which boosts your melee damage and increases your enrage duration. And then you have Unyielding, which causes a percentage of your health to regenerate over time. And if you're enraged, this doubles the effect. So as you can see, just from this first tier, enrage is going to be something you definitely want to build around with this class, because there's going to be so many things to help prop it up and improve that effect. Then we move into tier 2. Now this one brings some more impactful nodes that start to kind of develop a little bit more playstyle synergy for the class. So the first one we have is Icebreaker. Now Icebreaker gives increased damage to enemies who are slowed, which they should almost always be slowed since you're dealing frost damage. And the closer that enemy is to being frozen, the more damage you're going to deal. So you should be taking advantage of this basically all of the time. Then we have the Old Ways. This increases damage and gains more damage reduction the closer you are to the enemy. Then we have Instinct. This increases your reload speed and your weapon swap speed. And again, if you're enraged, then this effect is doubled. So tier 2, you can really start to kind of build your class identity. So you want to make sure to plan these out a little bit, that way you can take your build to the next level. Then we have tier 3. Now tier 3 continues to provide some impactful buffs. Some are good, some are kind of situational. So let's go ahead and get into these. So first up, we have Cold Snap. This is going to increase your movement speed and your frost efficiency. And while you're enraged, again, this effect is doubled. Now, frost efficiency is how quickly you're able to freeze enemies. Then we have Unarmored Defense, and this is a really interesting one. So this is going to cause a portion of your ward, which is your shield, to become reserved, and you cannot restore it. It's taken. But your maximum health is increased by a percentage of that reserved amount, and then your health can no longer be reserved. So this seems very situational. It seems like it's almost designed to take advantage of some legendaries that we haven't seen yet. So again, this one's going to be interesting to see how many people take it, use it, and flip it into a really cool build. So the next one is very simple and to the point, and that's Blood Frenzy. When you kill something, you're going to restore a percentage of your enrage timer and a percentage of your maximum health. So kill stuff, restore health. Very easy. It's a two-step process. Okay, so let's move into the next tier, and that's tier 4. Now, tier 4, we have 2 nodes to choose from. We have Ancient Fury, which increases your maximum health and your splash damage. So again, for your Feral Leap, that's going to be splash damage. Then we have Relentless Rage, and if you damage an enemy while in Save Your Soul, which is the second wind that we saw from other Borderlands games, then the duration is increased. But as you deal more damage, the amount extended is decreased. So you can't sit there forever and just kind of chip away. Eventually, it's going to get so close to 0, you're going to be not really extending it at all. Now, if you kill an enemy while in Save Your Soul, you will get back up and become enraged. So this one, again, seems pretty strong just to have on all of the time. Now, the second to last tier is tier 5, and this one comes with 2 nodes. Both of these are passive again, and they're pretty powerful. So first up, you have Blast Chill. So whenever you deal melee damage to an enemy, you have a chance to release a Frost Nova, which deals frost ability damage to nearby enemies. Now this cannot critically hit, so it's just going to be kind of those Frost Novas. Now I feel like this is going to be another one that just kind of makes sense to pick up. Because, I mean, just imagine activating your Dreadwind, which is your whirlwind, in a group of enemies, and just seeing all of these explosions just dominate your screen. I mean, it's going to be so satisfying watching enemies just evaporate in all of those Blast Chill explosions. And then the last thing we have is Iron Squall. Now, Iron Squall is going to increase your fire rate and your melee attack speed. And again, if you are enraged, these are doubled. So our last tier is our capstone node, and that's called Blood of the Fallen. Now, this node is another kill skill. So when you kill something, it activates. So whenever you kill something, your action skill cooldown is reduced by a percentage, and if you have an action skill activated, its duration is increased instead, just like your Dreadwind. So if you blend up enemies in your whirlwind, then you can continue extending it as long as you keep on slaying. And that is something that I really, really like, and I think a lot of players are going to build around that and kind of take advantage of this Blood of the Fallen because it just makes the most sense, especially for a beginner-friendly build. So as you can see, this class is all about violence and inflicting as much of it as possible. So if you enjoy the same, I would say pick up the Brrzerker as your primary class. You're really not going to go wrong. So keeping this video moving along, let's talk about another strong melee class, but this one is much less brazen. Instead, this class opts to operate from the shadows, and that's the Stabbomancer. So the Stabbomancer is the rogue of the bunch. He excels at dealing huge critical strikes and summoning ghost blades to kind of chop up all of your enemies. And then, after all that happens, he just disappears. Now, Stabbomancers are a jack of all trades, kind of a highwayman looking to capitalize on weaknesses, even if he cheats to tilt those odds into his favor. So let's go through what this class is and what makes it tick. So the class feat for the Stabbomancer is called Dirty Fighting, and it increases his critical hit chance by 30%. Plain and simple. That's all it does. You just plus 30%. So it's hard to turn down. And then we have 2 skills that come with the Stabbomancer. These are Ghost Blade and From the Shadows. So Ghost Blade is one that we saw very early on when this class was revealed. It's a purple double blade that spins wherever you cast it, whether it's in the air or on the ground. And because it's an illusion, you don't have to worry about gravity. You can literally just throw it up into the air and it's going to attack airborne enemies. You can put it on the ground to take care of some ground enemies. And this skill is going to deal melee damage periodically to anything nearby based on what weapon you have equipped. So if you have a frost weapon, it's going to deal frost damage, for instance. And if you use this skill again, you can move the blade to a new location. So it's not just a static cast. If your enemy moves, move your blade with it. And then we have From the Shadows, which gives the Stabbomancer stealth. And while you're in stealth, all damage dealt is automatically a critical hit, but those will deal decreased damage. Now this makes great for opening strikes, and we have some synergy in our skill tree that's going to play off of this, which we'll get into pretty shortly. Okay, so those are both the skills and the feats. Let's talk about the skill tree, because if you enjoy status effects, damage over time, sneaky gameplay, then you're going to absolutely love what this class brings. So for tier 1, we have some of those kind of basic passive effects that give you some small boosts. We have Arsenal, which increases your melee damage, your spell damage, and your gun damage. Just regular increases. Then we have Haste. Now Haste is going to increase your melee attack speed and your movement speed. And if you cast a spell, then this is doubled for a duration. Now this has to be a spell, right? Not an action skill, so you need to throw like a fireball or a frostbolt, not just cast your ghost blade. So there is a difference there. Then we have potent poisons. Now these are going to increase your status effect damage and duration. Now this is going to be a foundational node for status builds, and I think this is going to be something a lot of multi-classes are going to take advantage of. Now tier 2 is when things start adding a little more depth and get much more interesting. So our first node is called follow-up. Now whenever you deal gun damage to an enemy, you're going to gain a stacking buff, increasing the damage of your next melee attack. Then we have Swift Death, and this increases all damage dealt by the Stabbomancer. The faster you move, the bigger the bonus. Now this is a really cool node to build around because it makes movement speed increases directly increase your damage dealt, which is a unique idea. That way it's not so much like utility versus damage, instead it's utility equals damage. Now lastly, we have Exploit Their Weakness. Now this is one that I absolutely love. So whenever you apply a status effect to an enemy, the affected enemy takes increased damage from all other sources for the effect's duration, and this can stack for each unique status effect. So for those of you who just love to juggle dots, this is a perfect node to invest into. So let's go ahead and move into tier 3, where we get our first kill skill for the Stabbomancer. So we have Nimble Fingers, which increases your spell damage and your fire rate for a duration whenever you deal melee damage, which furthers that playstyle of spell weaving. And then we have our kill skill, Shadow Step. So whenever you defeat an enemy, your next melee attack is a guaranteed critical hit. And you can combo this with your From the Shadows action skill to go stealth and then deal critical hits to basically unleash a ton of damage, and then chain together those critical hits to wipe out those enemies, and then capitalize on Shadow Step's critical hits to deal even more damage to enemies, basically wiping out an entire group before they even realize what's happening. Lots of critical hits, lots of combos, so I love that these two can be put together. Next we have tier 4, and this is where 3 more nodes come into play. We have Sneak Attack, which is very simple and to the point. You're increasing your critical hit damage. Then we have Elusive. Now this is for those of you who love like a run and gun playstyle. So with this node, you can now shoot and sprint at the same time. Plus you gain a chance to evade incoming damage while you're moving. The faster you move, the greater the evasion chance. So as you can see, there's like a highwayman swashbuckler style of gameplay that's definitely possible here with the Stabbomancer. Lastly, we have Contagion. So whenever you apply a status effect, there's a chance that it spreads to nearby enemies. And if there's no enemies nearby, then it's going to deal a percentage of that total damage to that specific enemy instead. Now again, I think this would be a really cool playstyle with Clawbringer, since the Clawbringer class specializes in fire and lightning damage. So you can easily spread burns to basically everything. And we'll be getting into the Clawbringer and what synergy it brings a little bit later in the video. Now tier 5 brings us 2 more nodes. 1,000 Cuts, which causes critical hits to grant you increased damage for a duration, and this can stack up to 10 times. Now melee critical hits will grant you extra stacks. So being able to open with From the Shadows to kill an enemy, which then procs Shadow Step for another big crit, should again take care of another minion enemy, and that should leave you with 2 stacks to open most encounters. So you just have so much crit synergy built into this particular character. Then we have Alchemical Agent, and I absolutely love this node. I love this node. So melee critical hits will apply random status effects. And again, I just really like this, and I like how it works so well as a potential multi-class node with other melee classes, like a Brrzerker, where you're freezing everything, but at the same time, you could poison, you could apply fire, you could apply lightning, all of these other different things that can capitalize and combo with that frost melee is so powerful. Then we have our capstone node, and that's the Executioner's Blade. So gun and spell critical hits have a chance to create an ethereal blade that forms above the target and then will impale them after a short delay. Now these blades are going to deal melee damage based on your equipped melee weapon. So again, if you have an equipped frost weapon, it'll deal frost damage. And I really like the way that this passive is designed. It's supposed to be similar to a Sword of Damocles per se. And with our just unreal crit chance, these should be appearing all over the place. So Guys, that is it for the Stabbomancer. We have so many strong nodes in this class that will work well with most other classes, especially melee focused classes that have their own status effects built in that we can then take advantage of. So if you're looking for something that plays similar to like an Affliction Warlock, then I would say combine this with a spell shot, and that might get you close to what you're looking for. Now, our last class is my personal favorite, the Clawbringer. I mean, I've talked about it forever and nothing's changed. This is still one of my favorite classes. Having never played it, I'm very excited to jump in. So these hammer wielding warriors harness the power of fire and lightning to basically roast and electrify everything. Plus, they have a pet wyvern that just scorches everything around them. It's truly a wombo combo, and it's going to be very difficult to pull me away from that. So for the class feat for the Clawbringer, you have your wyvern. This pet is going to fly around spewing fire, attacking enemies, plus any increase to your damage will also increase your companion's damage. Now in terms of skills, you have Cleansing Flames, which is going to have you summon your hammer and then slam it to the ground, which will deal melee damage and create a massive fire nova, which will burn nearby enemies. Then you have Storm Dragon's Judgment. This lets you throw your hammer and deal lightning damage to everything that it touches. And then it sticks wherever it lands and deals AoE damage every single second. Then you can recall the hammer, dealing all of that damage again and refund a portion of your cooldown. This ability is just unreal. You throw your hammer, deal damage to everything in its path. Then it's going to stick into the ground wherever it lands and create an AoE that's going to deal damage every single second. Then you can recall it to deal even more damage and refund a portion of your cooldown to basically just chain throw this sucker all over the place. So that's something, really love it. Hope they don't change it. So anyway, let's go ahead and keep this thing moving, because this class basically combines what people love about Thor with a Holy Fire Paladin aesthetic, and it's just a great combo. Immediately spoke to me. So let's go ahead and break down those skill trees. So tier 1 gives us some very interesting nodes compared to the other melee classes. You have Oath of Fire, which will grant our gun attacks and wyvern bonus fire damage, so deal more fire damage. You have Radiance, which increases your maximum ward capacity, which is more buffer between damage and your health bar. And then we have Oath of Thunder, and this is our last one in tier 1. This basically operates the exact same as Oath of Fire, except it causes your melee attacks in wyvern to deal bonus lightning damage instead of fire damage. Now in tier 2, this brings our first aura to the mix, along with some pretty other powerful nodes. So Dragon Aura is a consistent aura that grants increased elemental damage to yourself and allies. It's just there. If you're near the Clawbringer, then Dragon Aura will be there. Dedication increases your skill cooldown rate. So the higher amount of ward that you have, the greater the bonus. And this just incentivizes stacking ward to lower all of your cooldowns and give you even more survivability. And then lastly, we have Rebuke, which gives the Clawbringer damage reduction from all attacks, and any allies that are near you gain a chance to reflect damage back as lightning damage, which I think, again, is just such a team-centric ability. So, I mean, you can see this class has tons of team support, and this is going to make it work really well as a multi-class prospect. So, for our tier 3, we only have one choice, and that's Blasphemit's Favor. Now, this is a kill skill, so it activates when you kill something. Killing an enemy with a gun summons a fire orb that then seeks out a new enemy and deals fire damage. Killing an enemy with melee damage summons a lightning orb. So this is going to be a very interesting skill. So we have this skill that doesn't really have a chance, right? It's a guarantee that on kills, you're going to summon an orb. And we don't know if this has an internal cooldown or not, because I could really see this being a huge part of a build. I'm absolutely here for it. I love AoE builds, so this one, again, just kind of speaks to me. So let's keep moving into tier 4. So we have 3 more nodes to choose from, and all of these are going to buff your pet. We have Firebolt, which is going to give your Wyvern another skill to use. It'll occasionally shoot Firebolt at enemies, which then causes damage in an area and leaves a splat on the ground. This also increases your gun damage. We have Friend to Flame, which basically just gives your Wyvern increased damage. Then we have Storm Breath, which is similar to Firebolts. Instead, it's going to use Lightning Breath, and that's going to cause chain lightning damage to go from enemy to enemy, and you also get a damage reduction. So this entire tier was about increasing the effectiveness of your Wyvern, and honestly, I'm thinking about taking both Firebolt and Lightning Breath because I think both of those together will work out pretty well. Now, Tier 5 gives us 2 more nodes before our capstone, Awe and Indomitable. So Awe gives you increased critical hit damage after dealing fire damage, or you can gain increased critical hit chance after dealing lightning damage. So you should be able to weave these two things together, a little bit of fire damage, a little bit of lightning damage, to both increase your critical hit chance and your critical hit damage, because they don't say they cancel each other out. So there's that. Now, Indomitable is a savior skill. So instead of entering Save Your Soul, instead you're going to refill your ward and deal bonus lightning damage. So again, it's just one of those things, get out of jail free card, check it once, and then move on to the next thing because it's going to be something you want to have. Now for our capstone, we have Storm Smite. So whenever you use an action skill, you're going to call down elemental bolts that deal fire or lightning damage to all enemies. Now again, more AoE damage to accompany those orbs that we talked about earlier in Blastomate's favor, right? So you kill enemies, orbs spawn. Now again, we have Storm Smite, and that's going to add even more AoE damage. And I'm just loving everything that comes with this class. You're going to be able to clear things so quickly, hopefully, as long as the damage is high enough. So everyone, those are your 3 melee classes, the skill trees, the feats, the skills, all of those things you're gonna get to choose from. So which one are you leaning towards? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you want more Wonderlands content, please subscribe, like, and share. Now, as for my next video, I'm gonna cover the ranged classes. And after that, we're gonna talk about multi-classing and creating the ultimate character. Thank you everyone so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I will talk to you next time.
Sound off one and all, everybody. Don't take what you openly handed. Reach up and grab the world by the hand and watch what comes along with it.